Right now we're learning in the Dvar Malchut. Dvar Malchut are speeches given by the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe, especially in 1991, 1992. And as you might know, the Lubavitcher Rebbe had a stroke in 1992. In 1992, he had a stroke, and it was like at the end of the month of Adar, which is, like about a month or so from now. And he had a stroke, and that rendered him, how do you say, mute. He couldn't speak. He couldn't speak. So these are like the last directions of the Rebbe on bringing Mashiach, the attitude we should have in order to do everything we can to bring the Mashiach. Okay, so the Rebbe said this week's Torah portion is talking about song, and it's the song of Bashalach, the song, and the Shabbat itself is called the Shabbat of song. That's what it's called, Shabbat Shira, and because we read about the splitting of the sea. And also in this week's Torah portion, it talks about also next week, especially, which we read in Mincha of this Shabbat, talks about Yitro. Yitro was a non-Jew, and he recognized the greatness of God because of the splitting of the sea, and also because of the war of Amalek. And that's going to be at the end of this week's Torah portion, also Amalek. So basically, these are things that Mashiach is going to do. Mashiach is going to fight the battles of God. Mashiach is going to spread the oneness of God to all the non-Jews as well. Non-Jews as well is going to do away with all evil in the world. And that's the big preparation for the Mashiach, which is the whole idea of the giving of the Torah. The Mashiach is just going to rejuvenate the Torah. He's going to make the Torah like it's brand new. Okay. Al pasuk it says, "V'lo nacham." It says that God took the Jews out of Egypt, right? And he did not take them straight into Israel through what's called the land of the Plishtim, right next to Egypt, even to this day. That's this whole thing of Palestine. They're talking about Gaza. It's been problematic for Judaism for all the time. That's the whole problem with Samson. It's been inhabited by different people, but they've always been the enemies of the Jews. So it says that God didn't let the Jews go straight into Israel from Egypt through the land called the Eretz Plishtim, because it was too close, and the Jews would be able to find their way back easily to Egypt, because they wanted to keep going back to Egypt. And so it says, from Egypt to the land of Israel, from Egypt, leaving Egypt to Israel was only 11 journeys. 11 journeys. If they would have gone straight into Israel, then there wouldn't have been all these problems that they had, right? From Israel to Israel was 11 journeys. But God took them in the desert for 40 years. Like it says, Echad Asar Yom Michorev. The Jewish people were only 11 days from Chorev, from Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is Chorev. And afterwards, it says, V'arba'im shana, it took 40 years. The Jews sinned with the golden calf. Excuse me. The Jews sinned with the golden calf. The Jews sinned with they didn't want to go into Israel. They refused to go into Israel. Therefore, they wandered for 40 years in the desert. Like it says, Echad Asar Yom Chorev, and afterwards it says they wandered for 40 years. Lochen, therefore, Ne'emar, it says, V'lo nacham Elokim, therefore it says that God did not allow them to go straight in. For whatever reason it was, God wanted that there should be this incredible, weird detour of 40 years in the desert. Let's explain, what are these 11 journeys that God could have gone through the desert? But instead, they went 40 years. What's good about that? Maliuta. But they could have gotten the Torah, and they got the Torah 50 days after they left Egypt. They could have gotten the Torah, and that's it. And they would have gone into Israel. Gotten the Torah, gone into Israel. So it should have just been 11 journeys. Instead of 11 journeys, it took them 40 years. Why? Because they were sinned with the golden calf, so that added more time. And then afterwards, God forgave them, and they took them to the edge of Israel, and they refused to go in. They said, "We don't want to go in. We want to stay in the desert. We like it in the desert." So it ended up they had to be 40 years. Okay, so this is bad. This is not good. Says the Rebbe, if God did it, it's good. Instead of 11 journeys, it took 40 years. The Pirush, what does it mean? 11 days doesn't mean 11 days because it took them 50 days just to get the Torah. So it means 11 journeys. Instead of 11 journeys, they took 42 journeys in the desert. Isa Midrash, it says in the Midrash, Shekai, this refers to Hamiyuchad Sheba the special, the unique journey, which was the 11th. Shu Echad, this is one. What's this? Is one second. This is the number one, which is the head of all of the 10 commandments. There are 10 commandments, but there's one that's unique from all of them. One stands out from all the others. That's, so to speak, 11. And what is that? The first of the 10 commandments. That's God himself. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God, your God. It's very easy to learn the Torah and to forget who gave the Torah and who is giving the Torah right now. Very easy to think the Torah is a book, and a book was given by God a long time ago. That makes it very important. But it's a book. So therefore, you have to remember the 10 commandments that were given, they were given by God. They weren't given by Moses. They weren't given by an angel or any force or being. They were given by God, who creates all being. God himself. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God, your God. So that's the 11th, so to speak. That's the unique one of the 10 commandments. Hainu ha'echad asa, that's the 11th day. That's what it's called, 11th day from Mount Sinai. This indicates on the level of the oneness of God, which was revealed at Sinai, which is above the 10 commandments. The 10 commandments are only 10, but the godliness in the 10 commandments, that's like something that stands above all of them. That's like the number 11. And that's what was revealed at Chorev. Chorev is Mount Sinai. It's called Chorev. That's the level of God, which is called Antuchad. God, you are one, and it is not a numerical one. This talks about God's essence, which is above all of the 10 sfirot and above the 10 the commandments and the 10 utterances that God created the world with. Is God. That's the thing we can never forget about in Judaism. The point of Judaism is God. To know that there's a creator, and the creator creates the world, and that the world is very important to the creator. And this creator, to show how important the world is, he gave the Torah. And the Torah tells us how to use the world. And when we use the world properly, it makes the creator happy. Nachat ruach. And when we don't do the Torah properly, it makes the creator not happy. And that's the idea of exile. But the main thing of Judaism is that everyone in the world should know that there's a creator that's creating them, and that this creator gave a set of instructions, the Torah. Yesh Lomar, we can say, but not to forget about, that's the whole point of Judaism, is God. Yesh Lomar, we can say, that the intention why God gave the Torah and did not allow the Jews to go straight into the land of Israel, but rather he detoured them in the desert. Instead of 11 journeys, God made it that they had to go 42 journeys, 40 years. Is because Bechinat Echad Asar, this level of 11, namely the 11, we said that's the oneness of God, which is above the 10. God, you are 10. You are one, which is with not any numerical. God, you are one, but not a numerical one, which is above the 10 sfirot and above the 10 utterances that God created the world with. The oneness of God, that's the 11th, we said. But God created the world with 10 utterances. 11 is God himself. This 11, namely God himself, what God wants is that it should be drawn down in the inside of the Jews by means of going into the desert for 40 years. It took them 40 years to internalize. I think this is a very important thing to remind us of. Why are we learning these ideas about Chassidut? Why is it that the Moshiach said to the Baal Shem Tov, when your ideas are spread out, that's when Moshiach is going to come? That's what Moshiach said. Why? Because the whole point of Moshiach is to internalize that people should reveal who they really are. Nothing new. Everyone should just know who they are. To reveal the fact that every human being is precious by God. That's a fact. To reveal that fact, that's what Moshiach. How do you reveal it? By everyone should feel it. To feel it. It's not a thing you have to frighten people into, or you have to encourage, but you have to, entice people into, right? That's why I think the 5 books of Moses doesn't talk about heaven or hell. Because heaven or hell means that you're thinking about something outside of you. I'm going to get a reward. I'm going to get something outside. I'm going to get punished. Someone outside is going to punish me. Here we're talking about internally who you are already. Of course, to reveal this is not easy, not simple. It's almost like a person is, let's say, a genius pianist, greatest pianist. The problem is that he's deaf, and that he grew up in poverty, so he never saw a piano in his life, and he has no idea. But he's an excellent pianist. He's the best in the world. Nobody's better than him. But he never practiced. He doesn't even know you have to practice. Doesn't even know of his talents. He has no idea. So that's like the Moshiach. The Moshiach is just coming to open up our eyes to who we are, to get us to practice so that we can bring out who our true identity is. That's what it means, the pinimiutam, to reveal on the inside. The oneness of God is what is the essence of everyone's personality. That's the essence of everyone's being, everyone in the world, non-Jews as well. By the Jews, it's expressed in the 613 commandments of the Torah. The Jews are more, have more responsibility. And that's why the Jews wandered for 40 years. It took them that long to internalize and to feel internally what they have to do. Now what's internalized by us? Ourselves. It doesn't take any effort. Right? Teachers, leave those kids alone. You already know what to do. That's not so. That's what we call the concealed world. That's like taking the blind, the deaf person, say, you're all right. Who has to say you have to play piano? Right? You're okay the way you are. Why make the effort? Why make the trouble? Why go through the trouble? Just be who you are. Right? Sing a couple songs and that's it. You don't know the tremendous potential of good that there is inside of the world. That's why the Torah was given. But it took the Jews 40 years to internalize this. Because it's not a thing you can tell someone to do and then he does it. It's a thing that has to come from within a person himself. Sometimes it can come in 1 second. And then that's what's called doing tshuva. Tshuva means to return to who you really are. And this, God gave, and in these 40 years, God gave the Jewish people a heart to know, and eyes to see, and ears to hear. She'en adam omed al sov dato. Shel Rabbo, it says a person cannot possibly understand what his rabbi is talking about, his teacher is talking about, and his wisdom until 40 years. Now, here we're talking about a different type of knowledge. I mean, a person can go to university and you can learn everything that the big professors have over there in a couple of days, right? If you're a big genius, then you can, there's people who are just geniuses. There's these people who have Asperger's and stuff like that, and they can look at a physics book or something, and they can get the whole thing in just a couple of days. They remember everything, right? It's possible. So what does it mean it takes 40 years? We're talking about 40 years to internalize this feeling of what God is inside of us, to internalize our connection to God. I know maybe the internalize is not the better word. Maybe externalize should be the because it's already in our essence and we have to bring it out. But we're talking about internalize means to bring it into your heart, that it becomes important to you. It's not just a subject, a topic, an idea, a religion. It also becomes something that's alive, real inside of you to reveal who you are, but it's very difficult to do. So it took them 40 years to actually integrate this awareness of God and what God wants us to do and why we're here in the world. It took them that long. The Az then there's the level of what's called the number 11. And all of the 10 aspects of your soul is revealed the oneness of God. The low and not only that, it should be revealed, this level of the oneness above 10, the 11, also in the physical world. That's why God wanted the Jews to come to Israel. And when they refused to go into Israel and they just wanted to be spiritual people and stay in the desert, it was a big punishment. That's why they wandered for 40 years. But what was the story? They received the Torah. Almost immediately after receiving the Torah, God said, okay, go to the land of Israel. They got up to the borders, and Moses said, okay, everyone, this is the day we've all been waiting for. We're going into the land of Israel. And everybody said, we weren't waiting for this day. We don't want to go in. Moses said, what? Everybody said, it must be hard of hearing, guys. Had a lot of troubles. I don't think we have to repeat it. We're not going in. Land of Israel. Moses, I don't believe it. Who agrees with these people? Everybody said, right? Everyone, all the Jewish people, we don't want to go in. We're not leaving. God said, you don't want to go into the land of Israel? Okay. So you won't go in. You'll stay in the desert for 40 years. That's what you want. The Jewish people said, listen, maybe we made a mistake. I don't know if that's what we want. And Moses said, listen, you guys, if you have any doubts about this, it's a sign that you're going to have to take 40 years to internalize this. If you have any doubts about what God is and you want to do things only for yourself, so that's the opposite of the Torah. It's the opposite of Judaism. It's the opposite of why God took you out of Egypt. Therefore, take your time. Take your time. I'll give you 40 years. Think about it. Internalize it. As soon as you decide you want to go in the land of Israel, then call me back. Right? Call me back and we'll see. We'll do it. And that's what happened. That's what happened. So it took the Jews 40 years to internalize that they should do what God wants and not necessarily what they want, or even more ideally, that they should want what God wants. So the 10 aspects of their soul should be devoted to the oneness of God. That's the number 11. This is also hinted at the beginning of this week's Torah portion. It says, Vayehi, this week's Torah, how does it start off? And it was when Paro, he sent the Jews. Paro evicted the Jews from Egypt. Sharomas, this indicates on Paro of holiness. Remember, we talked about that last week. It says Chamishit la Paro. It says 1/5 goes to Paro. We talked about this last week. For people who weren't with us last week or didn't hear the classes last week. So we said basically that everything that God does is good. But we see that we're living in a pretty terrible world, and that what the world is definitely not good. That we cannot leave the world the way it is, despite what the woke people say and things like that. The world is not a good world. Right? There's a lot of misery in the world, a lot of falseness, a lot of terrible world. But the source of falseness, the source of all this evil is God. God creates everything. So it must be somehow or other that God's ability to create bad things must come from a really, really high source, because it's giving us a clear hint of the truth. We have absolutely no idea what God is. That's the truth. Why would God make a Holocaust? Why would he do a thing like that? What's the answer? No answer. It's God did it, totally incomprehensible. Not only incomprehensible, it's against understanding. God is supposed to be good. God's supposed to be good. What did he do bad things? Doesn't make any sense. It says in its source, it is pure good. And that's where paro is. Paro means to be revealed. Paro, it says, is the place where is all the lights, the goodness of God is revealed. When it comes into this world, it ends up being not good. And we have to just bring it up to its source. So it says that's the idea of Paro. Paro, he is the one that evicted the Jews from Egypt. If it wasn't for that, they wouldn't have left. As it was, 4/5 didn't leave. It says they died in the plague of darkness. They wanted to stay in Egypt. So God said, okay, so stay in Egypt. The Paro. It says the Esperio, that there is revealed all of the upper lights. This is the level which is above the 4 letters of the name of God. Like we said, you, God, are one. This is the oneness of God. This is something like the concealed name of God we talked about in Likuti Torah, in the Torah Or. In Yedzeh, this idea that Paro, he evicted the Jewish people. This is the reason for the continuation of what it said. And God did not allow them to go directly into Israel. And God detoured the Jewish people in the desert. And he did it, and it ended up being 40 years. Why? In order that this level of Paro that evicted them from Egypt, but the good Paro, which said the source of all these lights, should be drawn down into their inside, panemius. That should be drawn down and internalized inside of every single Jew. That's the whole name of the whole business. That's the idea of Chassidut also. That people should understand ideas about God and think about how these ideas that they understand are talking about things that you can't understand. It's impossible to understand. And that brings a feeling of awe and a feeling of faith, emunah. Awe is of the God that we can see, and faith, emunah, is the God that we can't see. This brings an internal that our personalities become dominated by the oneness of God. And this is also hinted at by the Haftorah of this week, which is the song of Dvar. Dvar, the Jews, after they went across the sea and they had defeated all the Egyptians, so it was similar to what was going to happen. How much longer after that? A few hundred years after that, 300 years, something like that. After that, with Devorah, Devorah, she fought a battle against the enemies of Israel, and they won. They won, and it says she sang a song, just like the Jews sang a song. It says, "But Paro'ot be Israel." When there were difficulties, whatever, for the Jewish people, it says, "V'tashkeda oretz." Then the land was accepted. We won the battles, and then the land was quiet for 40 years. So it says, "Paro'ot means like, how do you say, riots and things like that, terrible things. But also is from the word of paro, means revealed, that the revelation parua, was so high, the paro'ot, that this is where is revealed all these upper lights of God, is drawn down into the Jewish people. The Al Yadam, and by means of them, also the physical land, the world, will be sheket, it'll be quiet. In other words, the awareness of God will be something that'll be quiet. It'll be, how do you say, an axiom. It'll be certain. By means of what? By means of the work that they did for 40 years. That's what it says, the world is quiet for 40 years. So in there, it's talking about that when the Jews defeated their enemies who were very bad, then the land was quiet for 40. You ever read the book of Judges? Really weird. The book of Judges, really weird book, really strange. The Jewish people, when they came into Israel, so it was 440 years until they built the first temple. So in the course of those, and that's when there started to be kings and things like that with King David. the 440 years that the Jewish people were in Israel before the temple was built, there's 440 years, there were all these judges that ruled, shoftim. And the story repeats itself over and over again, like 15 times, 16 times, over and over again, that the Jewish people were all doing Torah and the commandments, and everything was really good. And then the Jews started worshiping idols, and then the nations from around them attacked them. And then the Jews cried out to God, and God sent them one of the judges, one of the shoftim, and he gathered the people together, and he brought back Torah and mitzvahs, and they fought, and they won the battles miraculously, and they were all happy. And everything was quiet, and then the Jews started worshiping idols, and then the non-Jews, and it went the same story 15 times. And then the non-Jews attacked us, and the Jews cried out to God, and God sent them a leader, one of the shoftim, a judge, and the judge united the Jewish people, and they fought and they won, and they got rid of their enemies, and everything was quiet. And then when everything was quiet, the Jews started worshiping idols, and it just went over and over again. So it says it was the same thing. When there was the enemy attacked Israel and we won, that the land was quiet for 40 years. Says the Rebbe, that's the simple historical meaning. But deeper, it means, it means there's a revelation of Paro, which was talking about this upper light of God. And it was revealed in the land was quiet. Why? Because of the 40 years of work that they did in the desert. That this revelation was drawn down into Israel, into the land. And by means of them, even the land, even the physical land became quiet because of the work that they did by internalizing godliness for 40 years. In more detail. This is connected to all the details of this week's Torah portion. And one of them is, in this week's Torah portion, is that the Jewish people got out of Egypt and they went into the desert. By Yasef Derech HaMidbar, and they went through the desert. And then it starts beginning talking about the 42 journeys that the Jewish people made in the course of their 40 years of wandering until they came to Israel, Eretz Nashavas. This began from the journeys which are in our Torah portion. Vayiso Misukot, they went from Sukkot, they went to Vayachnu Be'etam, and the end of at the edge of the desert. And then it talks about splitting of the sea and what happened after the splitting of the sea. They went from one place, they went to another place, Midbar Shur. And then you have to look in the Torah portion and you'll see. And it came to Midbar Sin, and then they went from Midbar Sin, that's where the Mount Sinai is, to their journeys. So it's known that the Tachlit, the ultimate intention, why the Jewish people walked in the desert, is in order to refine the sparks of holiness that fell in the desert. There's sparks of holiness in the desert. What's this talking about? We'll see in a second. Sheshorsham, that their source, midarga nalit biyoter, that they come from a very high place. These sparks in the desert, they come from Tohu, the world of Tohu, which is above the world of Tikkun. What's this talking about? When God created the world, so he wanted there to be a world that we would have to work in. God put man, it says in Gan Eden, to work on it and to preserve it, to guard it, to work on it. What does it mean to work on it? It means to make the world more in tune with God, to use it for what it was intended. Use it for what it was intended. You buy a brand new piano, the piano costs whatever is it, $50,000, beautiful piano, it's all there. The piano is all there, but you got to play it. Nah, I want to watch it. I want to look at it. It's so beautiful. Look at, where'd you get that piano from? But can you play it? I don't play it. I don't want to wreck it. I don't want to use it. I want it to be unused, right? Unused firsthand piano. Well, that's ridiculous. So God, the world was like a big piano, and God put man in the world in order to perfect it, to use those keys, the black ones and the white ones, the way they're supposed to be used. That's called elevating the piano. The piano is no longer just another item in the world, very interesting piece of art, static, but it becomes alive. There's music, a new thing comes out of these pieces of wire and wood. It comes music, and you hear it, you cry, you laugh, you're happy. This same thing with the world. The world is here to be elevated. Elevating the world, that's called raising the sparks. Just like in the piano, every one of those keys has a use to it. A use. When you use those keys properly on the piano, then there comes music. The same thing in the world. Everything in the world has a purpose, a use. When you use those things properly, that's called elevating it, right? You elevate the keys to be music. You elevate the world to be godliness. It says that the Jews got out of Egypt, they received the Torah, and they went into the desert. The desert was the place where they practiced raising sparks, using the place where they were, the time where they were, exactly for what God wanted it. They wandered through the desert. They were surrounded by clouds. They learned Torah. They ate manna. They made blessings over there. They made families in the desert. They did things which were holy things. And that elevated the sparks. It made the world more meaningful. That this says that the source of these sparks comes from a tremendously high source. Let's take the example we had before. Where does music come from? A very high source. The guy's playing the piano. Ooh, that's really beautiful. What is that music? Where does music come from? What do you mean? It comes from the piano. No, it doesn't come from the piano. I mean, you're playing, somebody wrote the music. Yeah, that comes from the composer. Where did the composer get his ideas from? Who knows? I don't know. That harmony. Where's the source of harmony? A tremendously high thing, right? There's like the Romans and the Greeks made gods out of beauty, of harmony, of who knows what. They couldn't understand where it comes from. So the same thing is in the world. These sparks come into the world. The world has to be used. Where did the idea come from? The world could be used to serve God. That comes from God himself. It comes from a very, very high source. That source is what's called, it's given a Kabbalistic name, Tohu. Tohu, the world of confusion, so to speak. It's not orderly in this world, like this world is. The Jewish people, when they use and raise up these sparks of holiness, they raise to their source, then there comes, the world becomes tremendously meaningful. What does this mean? These sparks of holiness that fell into the desert, their source comes from this level we're talking about, the number 11, the oneness of God, which is above the 10 utterances that God created the world with, which is above the whole entire world. This is the surrounding level that from it comes a nurture to what's called the 11 crowns of evil. God wants there to be evil in the world. He doesn't want us to activate it. He wants there to be like just the same thing as, let's take the piano again, right? The piano. A person doesn't know how to play the piano. And you know the joke about the piano says, come to my house, I have a piano. You can tell the time. The piano tells the time. Piano tells it to tell the time. Come to my house. Comes to the guy's house, starts playing. The next door neighbor is pounding. Hey, it's 2:00 in the morning. What are you playing? See that? If you don't know how to play the piano, then it's terrible, right? So the piano can be the source of either beautiful music, or it can be source of this just irritating, terrible noise. Just like this. It says in its source, it's really good. It's really good beauty. But from this beauty can also come what's called the 11 crowns of evil. How is evil come into the world? The source of it is really good, but it's just misusing that. Like it's hinted at in the language of the Torah. It says that they went through the mountain of Seir. Mountain of Seir, that's going to be the source of evil, where Esav is going to be. God forbid, this is talking about the service of the Jewish people when they refine the world and they elevate the world to its source, to what's the number 11 of holiness, then is drawn down the level of 11th. This essence of God is drawn down to the Jewish people. When the Jewish people use their godly soul to serve God, then God also reveals his godliness in the world. That's the one which is above 10. 10 is the creation of the world. 10 utterances, the oneness of God is revealed, drawing down what's called the makif, the surrounding level. We learned in Torah Or. That's the upper name of God, which is drawn down into the proper places. the proper places, not into evil. And by means of this is added also a tremendous elevation in Torah and the commandments. Suddenly there's what's called inspiration. That's the 10 commandments, Aseret Divrot, the 10 commandments, which are attached to the 10 Sfirot. When the Jewish people serve God in the desert properly, that draws down to them a blessing of an inspiration that they are serving God in a proper way, like piano, right? A person that plays piano, so he gets all of a sudden inspiration, genius. And then the essence of God, which is above any measurement. That's what the Holy Temple was. The Holy Temple was a place where they did exactly what God wanted, and God gave a blessing there. So that people felt the blessing. The same thing can be everywhere in the world. You can't do what it did in the Holy Temple exactly. You can't make sacrifices. But when a Jew serves God the way God wants to in the world, then there is a reaction which is totally incommensurate of good to what the person did. That's called holiness. The ultimate holiness is found in the limited world. As we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Where are we now? We're in the chapter 4. Yesh Lahosif. Good. Now let's do the Yom Yom.